Hi, witches. I'm Blair Bathory, and this is the SomethingScary podcast. Thank you so much for being here. Whether this is your first time or you're one of the brave souls who join us every week. Summer carnivals, amusement parks, boardwalks, and arcades. These are places for carefree times enjoying funnel cakes and candy-floss, riding the Ferris wheel and trying to win prizes. These attractions are fun for most people, but for others, they are nightmares. After all, something wicked this way comes. First, an abandoned attraction, followed by heed the warning. Finally, the house always wins. Before we get to our stories, I wanted to thank all of you for the comments you leave on the podcast. We read every one of them, and we are so grateful for every one of you. If you haven't joined our Patreon, take a minute to do so. It would be amazing if you could join as a paid member. It's one of the easiest ways you can help Something Scary continue to bring you the podcast every single week. Thank you so much. So, want to hear something scary? Carnival nights and casino frights. Danger and excitement often go hand in hand, and sometimes the thrill of doing something forbidden overrules all common sense. But if you see the boarded up fences and signs saying, "Keep out," you really should pay attention, as in this story inspired by Salmon. Riley couldn't believe her mom was insisting on walking her to school. It was so embarrassing. She was 13, not 5. However, when they arrived at the entrance to the middle school, there were lots of other parents who'd also insisted on escorting their kids. In a small town where 3 young teens had already gone missing over the last few months, parents weren't taking any chances. It was either to be walked to school or stay home and be homeschooled. And Riley picked the lesser of two evils. Riley spotted her friend Sky and ran over to say hi. Sky was fairly new in town, and she was one of Riley's only friends. The two had quickly become close, and they hung out as much as they could. Sky's dad left early each day to work in the city, so Sky walked to and from school alone, making her the subject of much envy. As Riley and Sky walked to class, Riley couldn't help but notice some of the other girls laughing and pointing in their direction. Riley was by no means popular, but she had also managed to stay under the radar for any sort of bullying from head mean girl Cassidy. She whispered to Sky, who just shrugged her shoulders and told her to ignore them. But the feeling that other kids were gossiping about her continued over the next few days. Whenever she turned around, Riley would swear someone was pointing or laughing. It really began to upset her, even though Sky insisted she was imagining things. Despite Cassidy's presence at many of these incidents, Riley didn't want to burden her mom with any more worry, and if she gave her even the slightest indication she was unhappy at school, her mom would insist she stay home. Every morning the news was the same, a cheery TV reporter informing the town there was still no trace of the missing teens and urging people to be careful. Finally, Riley gave in, and she saw some comments about her written on one of the bathroom stalls. She rushed out in tears and didn't notice the stall next door was open. Cassie rolled out laughing, along with her accomplice, still holding the marker pen that had written Sky. That following morning, as she waved goodbye to her mom, Riley grabbed Sky's arm before they headed into the building. "Want a cut?" Sky's eyes widened in amazement. Riley had never been suggested cutting class before. She nodded, and the two girls snuck out. "I know where to go," suggested Riley. "There's an old, abandoned carnival on the outskirts of town. It's all overgrown and boarded up, but I know a way to sneak in. We won't need to worry about seeing any adults or cops who might wonder why we're not in school." The girls headed across the town, keeping to side streets and making sure not to draw any attention to themselves. Finally, they arrived at the site, where the chain fencing and barbed wire protected the perimeter of the carnival park. Riley led Sky to a break in the fencing, just big enough for them to squeeze through, and soon they were both inside the now desolate and eerie former family attraction. Sky looked around in awe. There were still several rusty rides in situ, a helter-skelter, Ferris wheel and bumper cars, and several tents and concession stands in varying states of decay. There were also some midway games still set up, a shooting gallery, ring toss, and the like. One even had a few moldy plushies still hanging as prizes, the stuffing having been pecked at by birds or rodents for nesting. "So what do we do?" asked Sky. "I'm guessing there's no power, nothing works anymore," and she added, lifting herself up to peer over the counter of one of the concession stands. No snacks left either. "Well, apparently," declared Riley, "this carnival is haunted, and the best place to try and see a ghost is, of course, a total cliche. But let's go to the haunted house." The girls headed over to the building, once designed to look like someone's house at Halloween, and now, with the broken windows, trash blowing around the real cobwebs, it didn't need any props to look creepy. Sky looked apprehensive, saying she wasn't sure they should go inside. Not that she was scared. She was quick to add, but it could be dangerous, and her dad would be pissed if she hurt herself and needed a tetanus shot. Riley promised it was just a walkthrough, so as long as they were careful where they stepped, they'd be fine. Sky acquiesced, and they entered the house. The inside was still set up with various scare scenes, and the girls laughed at some of the hokey props and mannequins. It wasn't a large attraction, and quickly they were nearing the final room when the smell hit. "Oh God!" cried Sky, covering her nose with her hand. The girls entered the last scene, which was far more realistic looking and violent than the others. "What the hell is that stink?" She turned to look at Riley, who stood very still. The expression on her face had changed, no longer happy and carefree. She suddenly looked angry. "You like that word stink, huh?" said Riley, "especially when you write it on the bathroom stalls with Cassidy." Sky was quiet. "Oh yeah, I know all about you and that bitch. Another word you like to use." Suddenly, Riley whipped something shiny out of her school backpack. Sky didn't have time to react or try to escape. Riley stabbed the knife into the girl's chest over and over until the light faded from Sky's eyes. Once she was sure she was dead, Riley added Sky's still bleeding corpse to the macabre tableau in the room. She grinned as she looked at the other 3 bodies in varying stages of decomposition. Soon the town would be even more worried after a 4th child went missing. Riley would play the perfect grieving best friend. After all, she'd had a ton of practice at keeping secrets already. Would you go into an abandoned carnival or amusement park? Would you be frightened that there might be something scary going on? Urban legends often act as warnings. Don't park in desolate areas. Razor blades in sweets. Don't take candy from strangers, and so on. They also teach us that sometimes something as innocent as a balloon can be deadly, as in this story inspired by Andrew. The sun was high and bright in the sky as Lacey walked around the Cherry Hill Summer Fair with her next-door neighbor, Hope. Hope had broken her leg falling off her pony a few weeks ago and had mostly been cooped up at home feeling sorry for herself. Lacey had wanted to go to the fair anyway, so she volunteered to take Hope and push her around in the wheelchair she'd been loaned to by the hospital. Hope looked up to Lacey like a big sister, and Hope's parents had been so grateful they'd given Lacey plenty of cash to have some fun at the fair and buy burgers and ice creams. Although Hope was unable to go on any of the rides, they had fun playing games like Hook a Duck and the Coconut Shy, and had just stopped for some candy-floss when Hope saw the balloon stand. "Oh yeah," she declared. "Please, please, please, can I have one of the big foil balloons?" The first thing Lacey noticed was the creepy-looking man selling them. He had greasy long hair and a straggly-looking beard. As he looked over in their direction, the man grinned, revealing he had more than a few missing teeth. He wore a dirty t-shirt and jeans with stains. Yet despite his less than appealing appearance, There was a steady line for his wares, and the helium balloons themselves were striking, the bright colors of the rainbow reflecting in the sunshine. "Are you sure you really want one?" Lacey asked Hope, hoping the child might change her mind, but Hope was adamant. And she even knew the exact one, a large silver foil with a pink smiling emoji holding up 2 fingers like a peace sign. As they got in the queue, Lacey couldn't help but hope that the emoji balloon would sell before they got to the front. She wasn't sure why, since she knew Hope would be upset, but there was something about that man and that balloon. Luck wasn't on her side, though. As they approached the front of the line, Hope was overjoyed to choose the one she'd set her heart on. Lacey tried not to look at the man as she handed over the money and began to tie the ribbon of the balloon to Hope's wheelchair. But despite there being a ton of people still waiting in line behind them, the vendor seemed adamant in telling her something. She met his eyes as she handed her her change. "This balloon is special," he began. "It'll keep your little friend here company." Lacey tried not to roll her eyes. It was a balloon, after all, not a puppy. The man continued, his face darkening. "She must lock it away when she sleeps. Cupboard, wardrobe, in the garage. Anywhere but next to her," he warned. "Okay," nodded Lacey. "I don't think we need to worry about accidental strangulation. She's 12, not 2, but thanks." Lacey began to wheel Hope away as the man called after her. "That's not what I'm warning you about. Take heed. Lock the balloon away at night." Hope wasn't remotely bothered by the creepy man or his ominous messages, but Lacey was flustered. They left the fair and went home. Lacey took Hope into her house, parking the wheelchair with the balloon in the hall. As Hope transferred onto her crutches and hopped into the back garden, Hope's parents were waiting to hear all about the day and invited Lacey to join them for a barbecue. Soon she was enjoying burgers and laughing at Hope's dad's terrible jokes. The strange man and his stranger words soon forgotten. But when it was time for her to leave and she walked through Hope's hallway, she had to pass the balloon again. She stared defiantly at the rainbow emoji holding up 2 fingers and raised a finger of her own in a not-so-polite gesture. And with that, she left. A few hours later, Hope's dad helped her up the stairs to her bedroom while her mom tied the balloon to the headboard, admiring the pretty colors. Hope was tired out from the long, hot day, and the warning from the balloon vendor to lock away before she slept didn't even cross her mind. She was fast asleep almost as soon as her head hit the pillow, while her parents enjoyed the warm evening with a coffee and good book in the garden. Hope was in a deep slumber when the pain began. It didn't wake her initially, although she began to dream that someone was trying to strangle her. She woke up with a start, but the pain was still there, getting tighter and tighter around her neck. Hope clawed at her throat and realized it was the ribbon from the balloon. She desperately tried to unwind it and call for help, but both endeavors were fruitless. She gasped for air, her vision blurring as the blood vessels in her eyeballs burst, all the while the ribbon getting impossibly tighter. It was now drawing blood, cutting into her skin, the pain becoming unbearable. The ribbon was acting like razor wire, continuing to cut into Hope's neck, and thankfully, she passed out from the intense pain as the ribbon continued to tighten and cut and tighten and cut. Hope's parents headed back upstairs to bed just before midnight. Hope's mom opened her door just to check on her daughter. Hope's dad heard her scream. He rushed into Hope's room and was greeted by the most terrible sight. Hope was slumped in bed, not moving. She had been completely decapitated. The bloody ribbon was still tied around her headless neck. As her father took in the carnage, something over by the window caught his eye. It was the balloon, now ribbonless and about to float away out into the open window. As Hope's mom continued to scream, her dad focused on the rainbow emoji holding up its hand and showing 3 fingers. Would you have heeded the warning from the creepy vendor? Would you have even taken an object home if it seemed cursed? And have you ever heard of another version of this story? Some settings seem born for horror: an abandoned hospital, an old prison, an empty school. But in truth, anywhere can hold a terrifying secret, even a vibrant, bustling casino, as in this story inspired by Tareq. Straight flush, the dealer across the table declared. Conrad laid his cards across the table with a smirk on his face. His opponent snarled in anger as he slid a fat wad of banknotes towards him. Conrad snatched the cash off the table and stuffed it into his already bulging pockets. He then turned on his heel, stalked past the bouncers and out of the casino. Melody, who was tending bar that evening, had been watching the game with an eagle eye, walked over to the casino owner's office. The tall, slim, well-dressed man was on the phone. As soon as he saw Melody, he finished off his phone call quickly and looked into the server's hazel eyes. The owner, Lewis, figured it was about Conrad, and he was right. Conrad was the best customer, and also their best winner. "Thanks, Melody," replied Lewis grimly. "I'll look into it, and if you're right, take care of it." Melody nodded and headed out of the office. Lewis declared an early closing time. Patrons finished their games and drinks and went on their way, some heading out onto the boardwalk to hit the amusements, and others home to bed to sleep off their sadness and impending debts. Lewis went into the security booth, followed closely by Melody. "So, you actually saw him cheating?" Melody scanned through the CCTV footage, looking for the right timestamp and angle on the blackjack table. She paused the tape and spun in the chair to face Lewis. The image was a little fuzzy, but it clearly showed Conrad sliding one of the cards out of his hand and replacing it with one of his in-sleeve, well-practiced moves. Lewis growled as Melody replayed the footage, honing in on the exact moment in question. There was absolutely no doubt about it. "Sir?" Melody asked in a quiet voice, wondering what her boss was thinking. He didn't respond, but his eyes filled with rage as he watched the security footage over and over, his hands clenched into tight fists. He ground his teeth before finally storming out of the room. Melody almost felt sorry for Conrad. Lewis was never the warmest of people, but she had never seen him this angry. "Next time Conrad comes into the casino and barks at one of the members of the security staff, you let me know right away." The bouncer nodded, speaking into his radio and alerting the others. "Any sign of Conrad, tell the boss straight away." That evening, on cue, as the regular beachgoers and day visitors began heading home, the casino started to fill up and Conrad strolled in, none the wiser that he'd been made. As soon as one of the security guys saw him, he radioed Lewis. It was unlike the boss to appear on the casino floor, but he wanted to watch Conrad like a hawk. As expected, it wasn't long before Conrad slipped a card out of his hand and into his sleeve. He then produced a card from his sleeve and put it into his hand. Rich didn't react immediately. Instead, he watched Conrad win the game from afar. Only then did he intervene. "Nice hand," Lewis proclaimed, clapping his hands. Conrad looked startled, but his smug expression soon returned. "Now, how about we raise the stakes?" Lewis suggested with a poker face of his own. Melody appeared with the craps table and placed it in between Conrad and Lewis. Two bouncers moved behind Conrad, just in case he tried to run. The men sat down, never breaking eye contact. "Win this roll, and all that the casino has ever taken from its loyal patrons is yours," Lewis explained, a glint in his eye. "But if you lose, I'll escort you to my office. No questions asked." He paused for a brief moment, then asked, "So do we have a deal?" Conrad was shaking on the inside. He knew a game of craps was all luck. There was no way he could force it or cheat, and he couldn't back out, not with Lewis facing him and the bouncers wouldn't allow it. He gulped, then took the dice, palms sweaty. Still, Conrad put on a brave face, his cocksure nature and false bravado overshadowing any nerves. "I would bet my life on me winning," he boasted as he tossed the dice. They landed, and Conrad immediately wished he could take the words back. Snake Eyes called Melody as the dice fell onto the board. Conrad loses, house wins. Louis grinned, and for the first time, Conrad felt genuinely unnerved. He swallowed hard over a lump in his throat. What exactly could they do to him? Ban him from the casino? There was no way he was coming back after this anyway. The rest of the floor seemed unnaturally quiet as the bouncers and Melody escorted Conrad to Louis's office. Louis entered first and held the door. He pointed at a chair behind a large desk, instructing Conrad to sit. Then as he closed the door, he nodded to the security guys. "You know what to do." Without a word, they walked off. "You too, Melody," Louis added as the door shut and the hostess scurried off. "You know something, Conrad?" Louis began in a formal voice as he moved towards where the man was sitting, staring at him. "I may run a successful casino, but even I know there are some bets you just don't take." He placed a firm hand on Conrad's shoulder and pulled him closer to him. "What was it you bet?" Louis whispered in Conrad's ear. "Your life, was it?" Conrad opened his mouth to protest, but Louis was fast. With inhumane strength and speed, Louis grabbed Conrad by the throat and sank his now sharp teeth into his neck. Conrad tried to scream, but it wouldn't have mattered. The office had been soundproofed decades ago. Louis sucked greedily on Conrad's neck until he was drained of life and blood. As Louis released him, Conrad's now shell of a body hit the floor with a dull thud. The staff at the casino who knew the rules cleaned everything up, just like always. The police came and went, finding no clues and learning about the debts Conrad owed. They soon filed the case as an unsolved missing persons report. A casino is a place where people come to have fun, maybe win some life-changing money. They hope to line their pockets, but in this casino, it was common knowledge amongst the staff that if someone cheats, they might never leave, losing far more than money. While most of the amusements on the boardwalk accept cash, the cost you pay at Santa Carla Casino could be your life. Have you ever been to a casino? What would you do if you saw someone cheating? And would you go to Santa Carla Casino? This week's podcast stories were edited by Sarah Lukasiewicz, narration by Blair Bathory, audio edited and mixed by Fitz Harris, additional audio editing by Calvin Linderman, produced by Anna Villalobos, executive produced by Gail Gilman, music by Sapphire Sandalo and Calvin Linderman.